My name is Isabella Moore. I'm 37 years old, currently living and working in San Francisco as the chief financial officer of a large healthcare conglomerate. In many people's eyes, I'm a successful, steady woman with a solid career and a loving husband. But no one knew. That morning changed my entire life. As I had just finished pouring my coffee, Ethan, my husband, pushed a stack of papers across the table and said lightly, "It's just a formality, you don't need to read it closely. Sign it." At the same time, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown sender. "You don't know what's going on yet, right? Don't let him make the first move." My hands went cold. Not because of Ethan's words, but because of the feeling that I had just stepped into a trap planned long ago. If one day, the person who shares your bed looks at you like prey about to be carved up, what would you do? Comment if you've ever had a gut feeling that something was wrong. Hit like if you believe women have the right to protect themselves. And don't forget to subscribe to the channel to follow the next part where I tell how I exposed Ethan's plan and turned his con into the final blow that cost him everything. The story truly began that very morning. I sat silently for hours in front of my computer screen, staring at the numbers dancing in my secondary account. That was where I kept a portion of my bonuses set aside as a personal reserve. Yet in recent months, strange withdrawals had appeared regularly: $500, $1,200, sometimes $750, then $2,000. Not large enough to raise immediate alarms, but enough to suggest an invisible hand quietly siphoning my life. I took a deep breath, trying to reassure myself I might have forgotten some transactions. But no, I work in finance. I know every figure, every ledger. I record all transactions, nothing gets overlooked. So where was this money going? And why was it disappearing so steadily? Ethan walked into the kitchen, a steaming mug of coffee in hand. He yawned, then gave a tired smile. "You're up early today. What are you looking at?" I quickly turned off the screen, keeping my voice even. "Just glancing over some spreadsheets for work." He sat across from me, those dark brown eyes shining with an interest that felt too intense to be natural. "I think it's time we consolidate all our assets in one place. You have too many accounts, too many categories. If something happens down the line, it'll be a mess." I paused, heart pounding. In 10 years of marriage, Ethan had never cared about my personal finances. He had his own job, a steady income, and we had a clear agreement. Shared expenses came from a joint account, and the rest we each managed ourselves. I once believed that was mutual respect. Yet here he was, acting as if he'd long planned to gather everything into his hands. I asked directly, "What are you talking about?" "I keep things separate because it's easier to manage." "Haven't we been fine this whole time?" Ethan smiled a little too smooth. "I'm just being cautious. The world's unpredictable. What if one day you need me to handle something fast? If everything's ready, it'll be easier for me to step in." It sounded reasonable, but my chest grew heavier. His words felt like tidy lines from a prepared script. I no longer recognized the man who once shared dreams with me when we first started out. A memory from 6 months ago surged back. That was when Ethan suddenly announced he was quitting his job. He told me over dinner, when I'd just come home from a long day. "I'm exhausted, Isabella. I can't handle the pressure anymore. I think I need a break for a while." I remember setting my fork down, looking at him with concern. "You've seemed fine all this time. Is something wrong?" He sighed, rubbing his forehead. "It's just, I've lost my spark. I feel burnt out. But don't worry, give me a few months off, and I'll get my edge back." I loved him, so I didn't object. I nodded and said, "Okay, I'll manage things, we can afford it. Just rest." From that day on, the financial burden fell entirely on me. I didn't complain. I thought it was duty and love. But now, comparing it with the disappearing funds, I saw everything had been set up in advance. One evening, I probed further. "Ethan, you've been talking a lot about real estate investing lately. Are you actually involved?" He was sitting in front of the TV, eyes glued to a football game, but his answer came instantly. "Yeah, a few small deals. Don't worry, I've got it under control." I glanced over. He didn't look like someone managing deals. If anything, his eyes darted away. "Where are you investing? With whom?" He took a sip of beer and answered curtly, "Some old friends. I don't want you to worry about it." I bit my lip, swallowing my anger. Didn't want me to worry or didn't want me to know. I felt more and more clearly a wall rising between us. That night, when he was asleep, I sat alone in the dark, weighed down. Questions hammered at my mind. Why did he suddenly quit? Why, since then, is he obsessing over my assets? And those funds, where are they flowing? The next morning, I took a risky step. I echoed what he'd said before, pretending to agree. "Maybe you're right, we should list everything. I'll write it out for convenience." His eyes lit up for a moment, then softened. "Yeah, good. I think the sooner the better." That smile made my skin crawl. In that instant, I saw another person behind the familiar face. Not the husband I once trusted, but someone carefully plotting, leading me toward a trap step by step. I left the kitchen and went to my office, trying to steady my breathing. A resolve rose in me. I had to find the truth before it was too late. In the days that followed, I watched him closely. I noticed Ethan often went out claiming to meet friends, but never told me who. He took more calls, voice low and clipped, always turning his back when I walked in. Once, I moved closer and caught a few stray words. "Don't worry, she doesn't suspect. Just a few more weeks." I froze, blood turning to ice. He was talking about me, no doubt. When he realized I was right behind him, Ethan hurriedly hung up and turned with a smile. "You're back?" "I was just talking business with an old friend." I forced a thin smile, but inside, a storm raged. Pieces were clicking into place. A plan was in motion, and I was the blindfolded pawn. Quietly, I booted up my laptop and downloaded detailed bank statements. More than 30 small transactions over 3 months, totaling over $15,000. Not huge compared to what I manage, but enough to tell me someone was carefully skimming, testing the waters to avoid detection. And that someone was Ethan. Closing the laptop, I looked out the window where city lights cast long shadows. I understood this marriage was no longer a refuge, it had become a battlefield. And if I wasn't vigilant, I'd wake up one day to find everything I'd built gone from my hands. I knew I couldn't sit still any longer. The disappearing money, the secret calls, Ethan's evasive eyes, they were enough of an alarm. But I also knew that relying on instinct alone would never free me from the net he was weaving. I needed the truth, evidence, and someone who could help me uncover what was behind the mask. One afternoon, after leaving the office, I drove to a small building tucked into downtown. The sign was discreet, simply reading Johnson and Associates. I was there to see Harper Johnson, a legal specialist who had spent years with the FBI, renowned for tracing dirty money faster than anyone. I'd learned of Harper through an old friend in auditing, and after one phone call, she agreed to meet. When I walked in, Harper sat in a warmly lit room, surrounded by stacks of files and a laptop. She was in her 40s, short hair, eyes sharp as a blade, but her voice was low and reassuring, making me feel safe. "Isabella Moore." She stood and offered her hand. "I heard a bit from your friend. But I want to hear it directly from you. What do you think your husband is hiding?" I told her everything, from the strange message from Claire Dixon and the small withdrawals to Ethan's push to consolidate my assets. Harper listened intently, tapping quick notes into an old leather notebook. When I finished, she nodded slightly. "If what you're saying is true, this isn't just a marital issue. It's a deliberate plan. And someone who plans like that always leaves a trail. The question is where to dig." Just 2 weeks later, Harper brought me a discovery that made my skin crawl. She set a thick file in front of me. "Ethan Moore," she said slowly, "is listed as the owner of a company in Nevada. It doesn't conduct any real business. It exists only to receive and move money. And what's more, the funds flow into an account under the name Claire Dixon." I was stunned. Claire Dixon, the same name that had texted me that morning. So who was she in this story? A victim like me, or Ethan's accomplice? That night, while Ethan was out meeting an old friend, I sat in my office, phone in hand, hesitating over the contact Harper had given me. I called. After a few rings, a soft female voice answered. "Hello, who is this?" "This is Isabella Moore," I said slowly. "Are you Claire Dixon?" There was a pause. Then a trembling voice. You finally called. I thought you'd never reach out. I gripped the phone. Who are you? Why is your name tied to transactions connected to my husband? And why did you text me? Claire took a deep breath. I used to be Ethan's personal assistant. I worked for him for almost 3 years. At first he was polite and generous, but then I discovered things that weren't right. He used me to open a few accounts in my name, said it was for convenience. When I started asking questions, he turned cold, even threatened me. I left, but kept some evidence. I texted you because I knew he was about to make his move. My heart felt like it would burst. What evidence? Claire hesitated a moment, then said, I have a recording. Ethan didn't know I had call recording on that day. He was talking to a man named Lucas Hale. The content, she choked up. Then recited almost word for word. If Isabella signs in 3 months, I'll file for divorce, take half the assets, and throw her into a media crisis. I went numb. Every vague suspicion became a stark truth. Not intuition, not baseless doubt. Ethan had really planned to take me down, not just to steal money but to destroy the reputation I'd worked so hard to build. Claire, I asked, my voice trembling with anger. Are you willing to share that recording with me? Yes, she answered quickly. I've kept it for a long time, but I was scared. I know Lucas, he's dangerous. Ethan, too. But if you're determined, I'll send it. The very next day, I received the audio file in the encrypted mailbox Harper set up. I opened it, my heart pounding. Ethan's voice came through clearly, smooth as if he were negotiating a contract. Once she signs, I'll have everything legal in my hands. 3 months later, I'll file, her reputation will be in pieces, and we can split the take. Lucas Hale's voice replied, You sure she won't suspect anything? Ethan laughed coldly on the recording. She trusts me. Isabella always trusts me. That's her fatal weakness. I dropped the earbuds, tears spilling over. Every word cut like a knife. The man I once loved with all my heart, to whom I had given my trust without hesitation, saw me as naive prey. Harper sat across from me, her eyes grave. Now you have evidence. But this is only the beginning. We need to know who Lucas is and what role he plays in this plan. I nodded, the pain giving way to a low, steady fire in my chest. If Ethan thought I'd collapse, he was wrong. I was no longer the woman who simply trusted her husband and signed with eyes closed. I'm someone who has managed billions of dollars, who has seen through the most complex numbers, and now I'll use those very skills to expose him. Harper, I said, my voice firmer than ever, keep digging. I want to know everything about Lucas Hale. And I want Claire protected. She's lived in fear for far too long. Harper smiled faintly, but determination lit her eyes. Good. Now you're ready to fight. I looked down at the file on the table, where dry lines of text laid bare a carefully staged con. Ethan had counted on me signing immediately out of trust. But he never imagined that his own greed and complacency would expose a fatal gap. And I would use it with everything I had. Only one thought rang inside me. This is no longer a marriage. This is a war. And I, Isabella Moore, will not lose. I sat in my small office, desk lamp pooling light over a blank page, my hand trembling slightly around the pen. In front of me was the legal packet Harper had prepared, the agreement to establish a trust. I chose the trust's name after my late mother, the Margaret Foundation. That name made me feel safe, as if she were still watching over and protecting me. In just one morning, all the shares I held in the company, my savings accounts, and even the title to the penthouse in downtown San Francisco, were transferred into this trust. Legally, nothing remained in my personal name, which meant Ethan couldn't touch a single dollar. When I signed the last page, Harper gave a small nod from across the table. Smart. From now on, if Ethan makes a move, everything is already out of his reach. You'll be the primary trustee, but on paper, the trust is a separate entity. He can't sue to claim any part of it. I set the pen down and drew a deep breath, as if shedding a heavy weight. But inside I knew this was only a defensive wall. To truly protect myself, I needed to go on the offensive. We have to set a trap for Ethan, I said, voice steady. He has to expose himself. Harper raised an eyebrow. eyes brightening. I agree. A man like Ethan is greedy enough not to resist a fat deal. If he bites, we'll have clear evidence. So the plan took shape. Harper would pose as an international investment broker and pitch Ethan on a real estate transfer promising massive returns, but requiring Greece to expedite permits. If Ethan agreed and took money from Lucas to cooperate, we'd record everything. In the days that followed, I lived in silence. Outwardly, I was the gentle wife, making breakfast, seeing my husband out the door, smiling as he spun his lies. But inside, I sat on hot coals. Every text from Harper made my heart race. One afternoon, Harper called. Isabella, he took the bait. I pitched Ethan on a land project in Nevada, and he showed immediate interest. He even asked if he could bring a friend to join the investment. I'm certain that's Lucas. I gripped the phone so hard my knuckles went white. Good. Let him bring his friend. We need him to believe he's in control. That evening, Ethan came home unusually excited. He shrugged off his coat, tossed it onto a chair, then wrapped his arms around me from behind. Baby, I might be able to swing a big deal soon. If it comes through, our lives will be more comfortable than ever. I kept my face calm, turned to him, and gave a faint smile. Really? Sounds important. Just be careful, don't get conned. Ethan chuckled and kissed my cheek. You worry too much. I know exactly what I'm doing. I stood still and let him hold me while my insides twisted. He had no idea I'd seen through the fires. The act. A few days later, Harper reported that Ethan and Lucas had scheduled a meeting with her in a rented office to discuss the fake deal in detail. She had cameras and hidden mics ready. Everything was set. When the first footage arrived, I watched with a heavy heart. On the video, Ethan wore a sharp suit, face glowing with the confidence of a polished businessman. Beside him sat a tall man with salt and pepper hair and cold eyes, Lucas Hale. Harper, in her broker persona, explained a resort development project and emphasized the need for a private fee to expedite permits. Lucas leaned in and lowered his voice. How much? Harper answered. $100,000 up front. Simple, if you're serious. Ethan glanced at Lucas, then gave a slight nod. No problem. We can swing that. I clenched my fists until my nails bit my skin. There was no doubt he had officially stepped into bribery, and it was all on tape. But Ethan didn't stop there. After the meeting, he invited Lucas to a fancy restaurant to celebrate. Harper tailed them discreetly and sent me photos from a distance. In the warm gold light, Ethan and Lucas clinked glasses, grinning. Ethan leaned back and spoke clearly enough for the next table to hear. Just one more small step. When Isabella signs, everything will be mine. Then we'll expand. We won't stop at San Francisco. Lucas chuckled softly and took a sip of wine. You're bold. I like that. A man is only admirable when he burns the boats behind him. Looking at those photos, a mix of fury and chill ran down my spine. The husband who had held my hand on our wedding day, who vowed to protect me, now sat laughing with a stranger, plotting every dollar in line to destroy me. Harper called, voice firm. Now we have everything: the shell company, the flow of funds, the recording, and the bribery on video. Ethan thinks he's winning, but he's just signed his own sentence. I leaned back in my chair, eyes stinging, a fire rising in my chest. For the first time in months, I felt truly in control. I wouldn't just defend anymore. From now on, every move I made would strike at Ethan's weakest point. And I wouldn't stop until he lost everything. That evening, as I walked in the door, Ethan was already seated at the dining table, looking worn out, shoulders slumped as if he'd carried an unbearable burden all day. In front of him lay a neatly clipped packet like a gift waiting to be opened. Isabella, he began, voice hoarse like a sick man. I haven't been feeling well these past few days. The doctor said I should be careful. I think it's time to plan ahead. For your sake too. I pulled out a chair and sat, calmly meeting his eyes. What do you want to say? Ethan slid the packet toward me, his hand trembling as if suppressing a heavy truth. This is just a simple financial agreement. If I fall ill, you won't have to struggle with paperwork. Everything will be transferred to me so I can manage it for you. It's just precaution. He spoke slowly, trying to stir my sympathy. I watched his fingers press lightly into the table edge, then looked at the packet. The cover clearly read Marital Asset Protection Agreement. I didn't need to open it to know what was inside. I took a breath and nodded slightly. All right, I'll sign. But not today. This weekend, at home, when we have time, I want to read it more carefully. For a split second, Ethan's eyes blazed, then softened to maintain composure. Of course. I just want you to feel secure. Over the next few days, I lived like an actress. By day, I laughed and made breakfast for my husband. By night, I listened to the lies he brought home. But in my mind, another stage was set, one where Ethan would be the unwilling audience. By the weekend, a light rain fell, thickening the air. I set the table neatly, placing a thick envelope in the center. Ethan walked in, wearing a mask of feigned fatigue, the old packet in hand. "Are you ready?" he asked in a hushed voice, as if this were a matter of life and death. I smiled slightly and sat. "Put it on the table. I have something for you too." Ethan raised an eyebrow and set down the agreement. I slid the envelope toward him. "Before I sign, we should be transparent. I prepared a few documents for us to review together." He opened the envelope. At first, it was just a bank statement. Then more pages appeared. The flow of funds from the Nevada Shell Company, suspicious transfers to Claire Dixon's account, and photos of him with Lucas at that fancy dinner. Ethan froze. His face drained of color. His eyes darted across the pages. His hands shook uncontrollably. "Where did you get this?" he stammered. I leaned back, arms crossed, and smiled. "Did you forget? Before becoming a CFO, I spent 3 years investigating financial crimes for the IRS. Money laundering, shell companies, underground deals. I've seen more than enough. And you thought I wouldn't notice." Ethan swallowed hard, scrambling for composure. "Isabella, you misunderstand. This is just, don't," I cut in, my voice icy. "Don't insult my intelligence with excuses. You say you're sick, that you're thinking about the future. In truth, you just want my signature so you can take everything. And once you have enough, you'll file for divorce. Isn't that right?" He sat mute, lips moving but no sound coming out. His silence was the clearest confession. I leaned forward, locking eyes with the emptiness in his gaze. "You planned meticulously, but there's one thing you didn't account for. I no longer trust you. And when trust is gone, you have nothing." Ethan suddenly shot to his feet, chair clattering back. "You have no right to do this to me. These are marital assets, you can't just move them all." Calmly, I gathered the papers from his hands and stacked them neatly. "You're wrong. Everything has been transferred into a lawful trust. On paper, nothing is in my name anymore. Which means you can't touch a single dollar." His face flushed crimson, eyes blazing. "You'll regret this. You have no idea who you're up against." I stood, keeping my tone even. "Oh, I know exactly. A betrayer, a greedy, cowardly man. And I will not lose." In that moment, I saw the change in his eyes, not the syrupy deceit but raw rage, like a cornered animal. But no matter how he snarled, I wasn't afraid. I had seen the evidence with my own eyes and held the key to unmask him. Ethan drew a deep breath, fighting for calm. He picked up the chair, set it upright, and sat with arms crossed. "Fine. You think you're clever, but the game isn't over. I'll find a way to take it all back. And when I do, you'll be the one begging." I looked at him, smiling faintly, voice low but clear. "No, Ethan. You're the one who just signed your own sentence. I'm only getting started." The room fell silent. Only the steady patter of rain on the windows remained, blending with the slow, steady beat in my chest. No longer the heartbeat of a deceived wife, but of someone ready to strike back. Just 1 week after the confrontation at home, I began to feel the force of the counterattack Ethan had quietly prepared. That morning, the moment I walked into the office, I sensed something off. Eyes that were once friendly turned cautious, small conversations cut off as I passed. I thought I was imagining things until my assistant, Anna, stepped in pale-faced, holding a stack of glossy printouts. "Miss Isabella." Her voice trembled. "You should see this." I took it. The front page of a well-known San Francisco tabloid blared a bold headline. CFO Isabella Moore mentally unstable? Years of sedative abuse. Below it, a string of anonymous sources described a stressed, quick-tempered woman, even implying I had taken extended leave for mental reasons. I felt the ground shake beneath me. I had never used sedatives, never undergone therapy. This was a brazen fabrication. "Ma'am, there's also this," Anna whispered, setting down another thick file. As if that weren't enough, a series of anonymous emails had been sent to the company's board, accusing me of involvement in an internal financial fraud scheme, claiming I'd diverted fund money into a personal account for shady investments. I drew a sharp breath, my chest tightening. I knew exactly who was behind it: Ethan. Only he knew me well enough to craft something that looked so plausible. That afternoon, I was called into an emergency meeting with the audit committee and the CEO. The room was cold. Stark white lights made everyone's faces look more severe than usual. "Isabella," Mr. Parker, the company's CEO, began, "these materials were just sent in. We can't ignore them. To ensure transparency, we have to place you on temporary leave while an internal investigation is conducted." I clenched my fists, keeping my voice steady. "These allegations are completely false. I have never committed any fraud, and I have never undergone therapy or used sedatives." Mr. Parker sighed. "I understand. But the press is involved and shareholders are calling nonstop. This is a mandatory decision. We'll get to the bottom of it, but for now, you should stay home." I stood, gathered what dignity I had left, and walked out amid curious stares. My heart ached not because of the temporary suspension, but because my own husband's betrayal had pushed me onto this path. He didn't just want money. He wanted me stripped of my name. That evening, I sat alone in the penthouse as rain beat against the windows. Harper called, her voice soft but firm. "I'm guessing the rumors have started to spread." "Not just spread," I rasped. "I've been suspended. Ethan wants to wreck my credibility before he makes his move. He knows my reputation matters more to me than money." Harper was quiet for a few seconds, then said, "It's a vicious blow. But it also shows he's desperate. Desperate people make mistakes. You need to stand firm." I closed my eyes, letting her voice fill my ears. I thought of the years I'd spent building my career, every clean financial report, every dollar I'd managed for the company. Now all of it stained by a single slander. The next day, things got worse. Articles flooded the web, paired with photos of me leaving headquarters looking exhausted. Clickbait headlines screamed, "Isabella Moore exits company amid financial firestorm." Even a few longtime colleagues began to keep their distance. A close friend on the executive team called, voice apologetic, "Isabella, I believe you, but brace yourself. The audit committee is under heavy pressure from shareholders. It looks like Ethan's given them a lot of documents." At first glance they seem convincing. I sat in silence, eyes shut tight. Ethan had plotted every step. He knew I loved my work, knew my reputation was my strongest weapon, and that's exactly why he aimed to break it first. But I knew one thing: the higher the wall of lies, the harder the fall. And I swore I wouldn't drown in the media storm he'd whipped up. That night, Harper stopped by. She set a small external hard drive on the table. I had an associate analyze the data in the materials Ethan sent out. "There are signs of tampering, but we need more time to nail it down." I looked up, my eyes bright in the dark. "If we can prove he fabricated this, he'll pay for it. And this time, I won't just play defense." Harper nodded. "Right. We'll turn his storm into a headwind that hits him square in the face." I poured myself a glass of red wine and took a small sip. Outside, the rain still hammered down. But inside, a fire had ignited. Ethan thought he'd seized the upper hand. He had no idea that from this moment on, I was ready to turn his dirty game into the weapon that would destroy him. Harper sat across from me, her eyes lighting up after days digging through data. She set her laptop down and turned the screen toward me. Lines of IP addresses, access logs, and digital traces filled the display, things not everyone would recognize. "Isabella," she said slowly, "I found the source of those anonymous smear materials. They were all sent from the server of a small law firm in Chicago. And guess what? That's where Ethan interned a few years ago. I gripped the arm of my chair. Pain and anger surged together. Ethan wasn't acting alone. He was leveraging old connections to orchestrate a full-scale campaign to bring me down. He thought he was careful, Harper continued. But the people most certain they won't be traced always leave clues. I've preserved everything, including login history from Ethan's personal account. I inhaled deeply, steadying myself. So now we can prove to the board it's all fabricated. Not just fabricated, Harper said, but criminal. Document falsification, defamation, unlawful system interference. I've compiled a legal report listing at least 6 ethical violations and 3 federal financial crimes Ethan has likely committed. I sat quietly for a long moment. It felt like a wave washing over me, relief and resolve together. This was the weapon Ethan had no idea existed. The next day, I walked into the main boardroom. All eyes turned toward me, some sympathetic, some skeptical, but mostly expectant. I stepped to the lectern with the thick report Harper and I had worked on for nights. "Ladies and gentlemen," I began, voice calm but firm. "In recent weeks I've been the target of a series of anonymous allegations about my mental stability and financial integrity. I'm not here to defend myself with words, I'm here to present evidence." I opened the first slide. On the screen, access logs and server traces were clear. I pointed to each one, explaining step by step, result by result. "The materials smearing me didn't come from shareholders or employees," I said, "but from the server of the law firm where my husband, Ethan Moore, once interned. The IP addresses, login traces, and timestamps match his personal account." Murmurs rippled through the room. I continued, my voice growing steadier. "Furthermore, I submit this legal report, which lists 6 ethical violations Ethan has committed. In addition, there are 3 federal financial crimes: document falsification, defamation causing reputational harm, and unlawful interference with a server to disseminate false information." I lifted my head and looked each person in the eye. "I was suspended because of these materials. But you can now see it's all theater. And the person behind it is the one I once trusted." The room grew heavy. Mr. Parker, the CEO, sat at the head of the room table, silent for a long time before speaking. "Miss Moore, this evidence is truly compelling. On behalf of the board, I apologize for having to suspend you during the investigation. Thanks to your patience, we now see the truth." Another board member, Miss Lopez, nodded. "We need to act immediately. Not only reinstate Miss Isabella, but also forward this entire file to federal authorities. Otherwise, we're enabling a criminal." My heart pounded, not from fear, but from the sense that justice was returning. Ethan thought he could bury me in the mud of the media, but his own dirty tricks had cleared the path for me to expose everything. Right there in the meeting, the board voted unanimously. I was reinstated immediately, and a referral would be sent at once for a federal investigation into Ethan Moore's actions. When the meeting ended, I walked out feeling as if a boulder had been lifted from my chest. Anna ran up, eyes shining. "Miss Isabella, I told everyone you were innocent. Now no one dares doubt it." I smiled and set a hand on her shoulder. "Thank you for believing in me. We still have work to do, but at least I'm not standing alone anymore." That evening, I sat with Harper in my office. She took a sip of coffee, eyes both tired and satisfied. We flipped the board. "Ethan thinks he's clever, but he forgot you're not a naive wife. You're a financial warrior, and he just shoved himself into a pit." I nodded, gazing out the window where city lights sparkled like 1,000 stars. "Ethan doesn't know everything yet. But now, I hold a weapon he never anticipated. From here on, I won't just protect myself. I'll make sure he sees every one of his sins laid bare." Inside me, anger had cooled into clear resolve. Ethan could whip up media storms and build walls of lies, but once the light hits, nothing can hide. And now, that light had begun to shine directly on him. The day I received the court summons, I sat for hours on the balcony, watching gray clouds drift over the San Francisco sky. Ethan had officially sued me, alleging unlawful transfer of marital assets. He wanted to turn my trust into proof that I was trying to hide communal property, a move both reckless and desperate. But I knew Ethan had never played to win fairly. He always chose the dirty route, hoping his opponent would tire and give up. Harper met me that evening. She set a thick file on the table, eyes bright with determination. "Don't worry. He'll trap himself. Remember the agreement from 2 years ago? Ethan signed a waiver of rights to your assets when you agreed to loan him money for his startup. The original is still here." I flipped through the familiar pages. Ethan's scrawled signature stood out. Memories flooded back. He begged me to invest in his tech dream, and I didn't hesitate to pull hundreds of thousands of dollars from my savings. In return, my attorney required Ethan to sign away any claim to my separate assets as protection. Back then, I treated it as a formality. Now, it had become my strongest shield. The day of the trial, the courtroom was packed. Reporters crowded the hallway, because a lawsuit between a prominent finance couple always draws eyes. I walked in with Harper beside me, dark coat, hair tied back, heart heavy but gaze steady. Ethan was already there, crisp suit, arrogant face. He glanced at me and gave a faint, mocking smile as if victory was already his. The judge struck the gavel, and the hearing began. Ethan's attorney rose first, voice booming. "Your Honor, my client believes his wife, Mrs. Isabella Moore, deliberately transferred all assets into a trust to conceal and deprive him of his lawful marital rights. This directly violates community property law." Every eye in the room turned toward me. I kept silent, waiting. Harper set a reassuring hand on my shoulder. When it was our turn, Harper stood and carefully opened the file. Her voice rang. "Clear, Your Honor, we submit the original, signed, and notarized document in which Mr. Ethan Moore voluntarily waived all rights to Mrs. Isabella's separate property 2 years ago, when he accepted her startup investment. That investment failed, but the legal document remains in effect." I saw Ethan's face blanch. He pressed his lips together, fists clenched, then forced himself to stay composed. Harper went on, presenting more documents. "We also have a witness and evidence showing the plaintiff planned to seize the defendant's assets. We call the witness Miss Claire Dixon." Murmurs rose as Claire came in. She wore a white blouse, hair tied neatly, eyes resolute. I noticed her hand tremble slightly as she placed it on the Bible to swear in, but her voice was firm. "I used to be Mr. Ethan Moore's assistant. I was instructed to put accounts in my name to disguise money flows. When I objected, he threatened me to stay silent. I kept a recording of a call between him and Mr. Lucas Hale in which they discussed, in detail, a plan to take Mrs. Isabella's assets. The recording was played immediately. Ethan's voice came through clearly. "If Isabella signs, in 3 months I'll file for divorce, take half the assets, and throw her into a media crisis." The courtroom jolted. Each word felt like a blade to my heart, but the pain didn't topple me. It became strength, and I stared straight at Ethan without blinking. Ethan's attorney stumbled to object, but the judge waved a hand. "It will all be entered into the record. Let the court evaluate." Harper didn't stop. She presented a series of photos of Ethan dining with Claire and Lucas at an upscale restaurant, toasting to celebrating the plan. Then came a detailed financial report tracing funds through the shell company in Nevada. Each piece of evidence fell like a hammer, and Ethan's face grew tighter with every blow. Finally, Harper concluded, "Your Honor, Mr. Ethan Moore's actions were not only aimed at asset seizure but also show potential violations of federal law. We request that all claims against Mrs. Isabella Moore be dismissed, and that the file be referred to federal authorities to consider the plaintiff's criminal liability." The room fell silent. The judge bowed his head and reviewed the documents for a long moment. I could hear my heartbeat thudding. Then the gavel sounded. "The court dismisses all claims by the plaintiff, Mr. Ethan Moore. The evidence shows he previously signed a waiver of rights to the assets, and the current allegations are unfounded. The file will be referred to federal authorities for investigation into suspicious conduct." I exhaled, tears blurring my eyes. Ethan stood frozen, face chalk white, lips clamped tight. In that instant, I saw him collapse. No confidence, no sneer. Only a man laid bare before the world. As I left the courtroom, I saw Claire waiting. She grasped my hand, voice trembling. "Thank you for giving me the chance to tell the truth. I've been afraid for so long. I hugged her and whispered, "No one can muzzle us forever." "You did the right thing." Harper stepped up and set a hand on my shoulder. "You see, justice can be slow, but once it arrives, it leaves no one out." I nodded, eyes lifting to the blue sky beyond the courthouse corridor. I knew the battle wasn't entirely over, but today I had reclaimed my honor and proved that truth is stronger than lies. Most importantly, I looked straight at the man who used to be my husband, and I wasn't afraid anymore. I hadn't yet savored the relief of the court dismissing Ethan's claims when Harper set a new file in front of me. Her eyes were stern but bright. "Isabella, we can't stop here. If we only defend, he'll keep coming back. The only way to end this is to attack. Are you ready to countersue?" I nodded slightly, resolve rising. "Not just Ethan. Lucas and the law firm that aided him have to pay, too. I want everything exposed." Harper smiled faintly. "Just as I thought." In the days that followed, we dove into the work. Every piece of evidence we'd gathered was organized into a tight case. Harper and her team dug for more financial traces tied to Lucas. Every money trail, every deleted email, every recording was backed up carefully. I spent night after night in my office, reading page after page, eyes aching but heart blazing with conviction. On the day we filed, I walked into the courthouse with a strange calm. Ethan showed up later, gaunter than before, still straining for arrogance. Lucas came with him, sleek in a black suit but eyes forever averted. Representatives from the law firm were there too, faces cold as if they were innocent. Harper rose before the court, voice resonant. "Your Honor, we are filing a countersuit against Mr. Ethan Moore, Mr. Lucas Hale, and the law firm Reynolds and Associates for conspiracy to forge documents, defamation, and causing severe harm to Mrs. Isabella Moore's reputation, income, and emotional well-being. We seek damages of $1.7 million and request a federal investigation into additional unlawful acts." The air in the courtroom stretched taut. Opposing counsel tried to argue insufficient evidence, and that I was retaliating. But Harper rolled out documents that couldn't be denied. Originals of doctored files, server logs from the law firm, emails between Lucas and Ethan discussing media handling, and Claire's testimony. Claire entered steadier. She held her head high and looked straight at the judge. "I was forced to put accounts in my name. I was threatened if I spoke up. Today I confirm everything Mrs. Isabella has presented is true. I'm also submitting another recording in which Mr. Lucas and Mr. Ethan discuss using Reynolds and Associates to legitimize forged documents." The recording played. Lucas's low voice, "As long as Reynolds tidies up the file, we'll have a pretext the court will buy." Ethan replied, "Good. When Isabella loses credibility, I'll have it all." The sound echoed through the room, undeniable. The law firm's representatives tried to intervene, but their faces had gone pale. When it was my turn to speak, I stood, voice calm but each word landing heavy. "I've devoted my life to transparent finance. I never imagined I'd sit here fighting the very man who vowed to protect me. But the truth is, he not only betrayed our marriage, he set out to destroy my reputation by any means. I'm not here for money. I'm here for the truth and to prove justice still exists." Silence, then the judge signaled us to proceed. After hours of arguments, the final gavel fell. The court orders Mr. Ethan Moore to pay Mrs. Isabella Moore $1.7 million in damages, including reputational harm, loss of income, and emotional distress. Mr. Lucas Hale will be subject to a federal investigation for tax evasion and participation in illicit financial schemes. Reynolds and Associates will bear joint liability for aiding in document forgery. I closed my eyes, feeling a heavy weight lift from my body. Ethan sat stunned, hands clenched, face flushed with rage and shame. Lucas stood beside him, trying to stay composed as sweat beaded on his forehead. When the session ended, Claire rushed to me, eyes wet. I never thought I'd be free. Thank you, Isabella. Because of you, I'm no longer a shadow of my past." I took her hand and squeezed. "You deserve to be free. Start over, you're not alone." Harper came to my side and gave a small nod. "You did it. This was the knockout punch, Isabella. He has no way back." I looked around the courtroom as the rows slowly emptied. Inside, I felt a peace I'd never known. I knew I'd weathered a brutal storm. More importantly, I'd stood up, faced it, and made the betrayer pay. $1.7 million couldn't make up for all the harm I'd endured. But it proved that the truth had won. News of the court's decision spread faster than I expected. Just a few days later, Ethan vanished from San Francisco as if he'd never existed. Friends said he unloaded his favorite sports car, and the apartment that once was our home was sealed by the bank because he couldn't pay the mounting debt. I wasn't happy or sad. It was all just an old page turned and left behind. In the mornings after that, I could sit quietly on the balcony, sip a cup of coffee, and watch sunlight stretch across the bay. No more non-stop calls from lawyers, no more reporters lurking, only the sound of wind brushing the curtains and a rare stillness. I felt my breathing grow steadier, lighter. One afternoon, I received a call from an unfamiliar woman. Her voice was warm, confident. "Mrs. Moore, this is Linda Carter, the chair of this year's National Conference on Women and Finance. We'd like to invite you, as the keynote speaker, to share your experience and journey. This year's theme is, No One Can Take Away What You Protect the Right Way." I went quiet for a moment, then let out a small laugh. Life is strange. Just a short while ago I was the victim of a filthy scheme. And now I was being asked to stand before thousands and talk about how I held my ground. "I accept," I said, firm. On the day of the conference, the Grand Hall in New York glowed under bright lights. Hundreds of women from everywhere filled the seats, some business leaders, some everyday office workers, and some who had left their marriages after financial coercion. I stepped to the podium with only a few notes in hand, but a heart full of resolve. I began with my own story. I spoke about the morning Ethan slid fake papers in front of me, the smears in the press, and the moment I flipped the script in court. Eyes across the audience shimmered. Some women nodded again and again, others clenched their hands as if finding new strength. "The most important thing," I concluded, "is not how much money we have, but how we protect our values and our dignity. No one can take away what you protect the right way. And sometimes, that protection starts the moment you dare to say no." Applause thundered. As I stepped down, many women came forward, shaking hands, hugging, whispering thanks. I realized my story wasn't just a personal battle. It had become part of a shared journey for so many. That's what pushed me to start a nonprofit. I named it the Moore Shield Foundation. The word shield stands for protection, the strength to rise up against financial abuse in marriage. I called Claire as soon as the idea took shape. "Do you want to join me? You've been through it all. You know better than anyone what women need in that situation." On the other end, Claire was quiet for a few seconds, then answered, voice shaky but firm, "I'm ready. I owe you, and I want to repay it by helping others avoid the same darkness I did." The early days were tough. We had a small office sublet on the third floor of an old building, a few worn desks and chairs, and a budget from the lawsuit damages. But I'd never felt more energized. Claire handled outreach to women who came to us. She listened, comforted, and shared her own experience as proof that anyone can get through it. I focused on building training programs, personal finance management, how to set up an emergency fund, and basic legal knowledge so women wouldn't be blindsided when a marriage fractures. One afternoon I looked through the office window and saw Claire sitting with a young woman who was crying. She was barely in her 20s, her husband controlling every paycheck, not even letting her keep a bank card. Claire held her hand and spoke gently, "I've been where you are. I got out, and you will too." I stepped in and set a packet in front of the young woman. "These are the basic steps to greet her. Start. We'll walk with you the whole way." Her eyes brightened through the tears. I knew that single moment was enough to confirm I was on the right path. We gradually gained more volunteers and more funding. The tiny office became a respected organization, mentioned in the press as a new refuge for women. I received many letters of thanks, many stories that tightened my chest but filled me with pride. Once, Harper came by and watched as Claire and I rushed about. She smiled, her voice warm and low. "I remember seeing you collapse in your office, thinking you'd never stand up again. Look at you now, you're not only on your feet, you've rallied an army of strong women." I squeezed her hand. "I wouldn't have gotten here without you." Harper shook her head. No. You decided to stand up. I just showed the way. I looked at Claire, at the women coming and going through our little office. Inside me, a new chapter had truly opened. No more Ethan, no more darkness. Only the light of resilience and the belief that no one can take away what we are determined to protect. I stood on the balcony of my new apartment, a glass of red wine catching the dusk, eyes on the Golden Gate Bridge slipping into sunset. The city stretched like a living painting, rippling waves, faint car horns, sea air with a light salt touch on my skin. Everything felt peaceful, almost unbelievable, considering what I'd lived through just months before. A fresh notebook lay on the small table. I opened the first page and wrote the first lines. He almost took everything, but I knew how to save myself. The ink spread lightly on the paper, each stroke etching a journey of blood and tears, but also iron resolve. I wasn't writing for Ethan, or for anyone who had hurt me. I was writing for myself and for the women out there searching for a ray of light in the dark. The phone on the table buzzed. A message from an unknown number appeared. I will be back. I stared at the screen, my heart momentarily still. For a second, I could picture Ethan's face, eyes full of hatred, his voice cold as steel. Then another feeling rose calm. I was no longer the woman who trembled in the dark, afraid of her husband's schemes. I had weathered the storm, and I knew my own strength. I hit block. The screen went black, quiet. I smiled and whispered, "There's nothing left to come back to." A moment later, Claire stopped by. She brought a stack of documents for the Foundation's new financial training program for women. Seeing me on the balcony, she tilted her head. "What are you writing?" I held up the notebook. My book. Not a memoir to complain, but a true story so others know they can stand up too. The working title is He Almost Took Everything, but I Knew How to Save Myself. Claire smiled, admiration in her eyes. "You saved me, Isabella. And I believe this book will save many others." I set the pen down and poured more wine for Flive. Both of us. We sat across from each other, talking about the young women who had just come to the Foundation, plans to take the program statewide, and even the dream of expanding into free legal counseling. Neither of us mentioned Ethan again. He was just a shadow behind us now, a name used only to prove that truth ultimately prevails. When Claire left, the city was glowing. I returned to the notebook and wrote a few more lines. Victory isn't the damages awarded. Victory isn't the applause or the honors on stage. True victory is freedom, freedom from fear, freedom from the bonds of someone who tried to erase me, freedom to be myself. I set the pen down and leaned back. Faces of women I'd met echoed in my mind. The young mother clutching her child, sobbing because her husband controlled every dollar. The young woman opening her first private account. The middle-aged woman stepping out of a long marriage lived in shadows. They are the reason I didn't fall. The distant surf blended with the wind, bringing a sense of peace. I raised my glass toward the crimson horizon. This wasn't just the end of a marriage, it was the birth of a new self. Isabella Moore, no longer a victim, no longer a name dragged into dirty games. I am a survivor, a witness, and living proof that no one can take the inner strength of a woman determined to protect herself. I smiled softly and lifted my glass in a quiet toast. Victory isn't money. Victory is freedom. Every line I wrote today wasn't just a period on an old chapter, it was a message to anyone lost in the dark of betrayal and control. Freedom doesn't always come from grand battles. Sometimes, it begins the moment you dare to say, enough. My story may be a mirror or a reminder. You can lose assets, reputation, even loved ones. But if you keep your inner strength, you will never truly be defeated. What do you think of my choices? If you were in that situation, how would you respond? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments, because honest sharing can be a source of strength for someone else. And if you want to keep walking this path with me, don't forget to follow the channel so you won't miss the next stories where we listen and reflect together on love, family, and the life lessons we all eventually face.